So let's wait 1-2 minutes and start. So, hello. Today is our last lecture about pedagogy, lecture number 8. So, when we start, today's lecture will be about history of pedagogy. So now I see. Okay, great. Let's start. So today we will speak about pedagogical idea in Europe and Russia. And let's start our lecture. So, lecture number 8, development of pedagogy in Europe and Russia. So we will speak about history of pedagogy because it's a really interesting part of pedagogy, and we already spoke about some of very famous scientists in pedagogy, and now we will see another famous name in pedagogy, of course. So first of all, we start from pedagogy in Europe. In the writing of the larger thinker, Democritus, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, such important ideas of upbringing are formed as nature and upbringing are similar. The doctrine produced wonderful things only on the basis of labor and etc. Their idea provide that the most viable system of education are those in which the main things in the moral and labor principle. So, of course, in ancient Greece, start pedagogy, start philosophy, psychology, and another very important science for us now. And of course, I think you spoke about Aristotle, Plato, and so on philosophy lecture, and here we see the picture, it's painting, about very famous ancient philosopher here. It's Plato school. But we're interested in more modern pedagogy, and of course, again, we'll speak about Jan Amos Comenius, educate children in the native language. He developed all the basic questions of the organization of educational work and class lesson system. We already spoke about them when I gave information about the most classical educational system, class lesson system. And now we'll speak about Kamensky more deeply, about their principles and so on. So this is Jan Amos Comenius. So we can see that it's 16th, 17th century. Czech pedagogy, humanist, writer, public figure, bishop of the Czech Church, founder of scientific pedagogy, systematic popularization of the class lesson system. So the most permanent influence exerted by Comenius was in practical educational work. Few men since his days have heard a great influence thought for the greater part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th. There was little recognition of his relationship to the current advance in educational thought and practice. The practical educational influence of Comenius was threefold. He was first a teacher and an organizer of school, not only among his own people, but later in Sweden and to a slight extent in Holland. In his Didactica Magna, or Great Didactic, is the main book, he outlined the system of school that is the exact counterpart of the existing American system for kindergarten, elementary school, secondary school, college, and university. About this we spoke at lecture number 6. In the second place, the influence of Comenius was formulating the general theory of education. In this respect, he is foreign for Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Froebel, and Sepcher, and also we'll speak about Rousseau and Pestalozzi. And is the first to formulate the idea of education according to nature, so influential during the later part of the 18th and early part of the 19th century. The third aspect of his educational influence was that on the subject matter and methods of education exerted through the series of textbooks of an entirely new nature. So his Great Didactic, these texts were all based on the same fundamental idea. So here we see 6 very important ideas. So first of all, number 1, learning foreign languages through the vernacular. The second, obtaining idea through objects that are the words. Number 3, starting with object most familiar to the child to introduce him to both the new language and the more remote world of objects. Number 4, giving the child a comprehensive knowledge of his environment, physical and social, as well as instruction in religion, moral, and classical subjects. Number 5, making this using of a compendium of knowledge and pleasure rather than a task. And number 6, making instruction universal. Kamensky believed that the basis of pedagogical activity is a principle of conformity to nature. And according to this principle, education and upbringing should correspond to the natural in general and the nature of the child, his psychological characteristic. And here we can see a picture of his work, his book, one of his books. So let's see some of his important fundamental pedagogical idea. So first of all, it's universal education of the people. The second is democratic school system with successive links, introducing the younger generation to work, bringing education closer to the needs of society, moral education at the beginning of human. So Jan Amos Komensky was one of the first very important humanists in Europe in 17th century, and his idea was really fundamental, really modern, and for now we use his idea because they're very important for us. He proclaimed the compulsory nature of real society socially useful training, and he paid special attention to the development of the child's sensory organs. And according to Comenius, there are 3 tasks of education. First of all, knowledge of oneself and the world around. It's so-called mental education. Second is self-management and moral education. And number 3, desire of God, is religious education, of course, because it's 17th century. And also we can see age periodization according to Comenius divides the life of the younger generation into 4 age periods, 6 years each. The first is from birth to 6 years, it's called childhood. From 6 to 12 is adolescence. From 12 to 18 is youth, and from 18 to 24 is maturity. And of course, it was not the first periodization, because one of the first was Aristotle's periodization, but his periodization connected with the idea how to teach about what why so important is this age and so on. And we can see the basis of the division of age feature. So, in childhood, it's really important physical growth, development of the sense, and understanding that the age is very young, and for child is necessary to be with his family and to understand nature around him. In adolescence, it's development of memory and imagination. Kamensky thought that imagination it's really important for child, and it's really important to work with memory in side of psychology and so on. In youth, a higher level of development of thinking and maturity is development of will and the ability of maintain harmony. So you can see this age, 18, from 12 to 18. It's really important to understand the main idea of some important science about language, culture, so on. And for example, for children under 6 years of age, he offered a maternal school, so preschool education under the guidance of the mother. It should give the children an initial idea of the surrounding nature and social life. For adolescents, a mother tongue school, it's called mother tongue school. For young people, Latin school or gymnasium. 7 free arts were studied there. They study physics, geography, history, Latin, Greek language, and one of the new languages. And for mature young people, an academy with the faculty, technological, legal, and medical. So we can see that in 16th, 17th century, the ideas was clear, was near to our ideas. The same, like school, high school, and so on, university, and so on. And for example, here we can see 7 free arts. 7 free arts is a big program in university, in old Europe university, for example, Sorbonne or Oxford. And these 7 free arts started from some idea of Comenius, and in this 7 free arts was also math, was also philosophy, of course, and different languages. And Kamensky thought that it's important to know your own language. The importance of the Comenian influence in education has been recognized since the middle of 19th century. The educational writing of Comenius comprised more than 40 titles. In 1892, the 300th anniversary of Comenius was very generally celebrated by educators, and at the time the Comenian Society for the Study and Publication of his work was formed. So for now, Comenius is a really important person, and Comenius it's like I think the most famous and important scientist in pedagogy, like Sigmund Freud in the psychology. So we all know Sigmund Freud in psychology and his idea, and also the same in pedagogy. But not only Comenius was important and famous in Europe pedagogy. Of course, his influence to another famous scientist is very important, and we will speak about another famous pedagogist like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Pestalozzi. And then we'll see some modern idea, some small video about modern idea, and we will speak about Russian pedagogy. So, number 2, the famous pedagogist, is John Locke. So we can see that it's 17th-18th century. He was in task in teaching a person to manage himself, his passion. John Locke believed that a virtuous, intelligent, and skilled person is much more preferable than a great scientist who does not possess these qualities. Oh, sorry. And the idea of John Locke, maybe for modern age, is to old, because he thought that a really good education can possess only a very famous and rich person. So poor people cannot get a very good education. It's not necessary for him to get education, to study in university and so on. And also he speak about education of gentlemen, and thought that child, it's like empty space, and it depends of the family, teacher, and depends of another important things, which person will be in the future. So it is important to educate child in the early age, and to understand what advantages he's got or what qualities. But the idea of John Locke was really connected with differentiation in society, so with rich and famous person. Another famous pedagogist in Jacques Rousseau is French philosopher, writer, and thinker of Englishman. Also a composer. He thought about representative of sentimentalism. And Jacques Rousseau is 18th century, and his idea was another like John Locke. He spoke about education for everyone, not depends of how much money you've got. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau belonged to the French educator of the 17th century. He put forward the theory of natural free education, which was largely consistent with the principle of comenius, of nature conformity. Rousseau developed an age periodization of the development of the child and the pedagogical task of physical, mental, and moral development, corresponding to each period. Jean-Jacques Rousseau attached great importance to the need for labor training, so that a person could earn a living and be independent. Here we can see USSR mark about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His idea was also popular in the USSR. Rousseau age periodization we can see here. So, from birth to 2 years, the healthy physical development of the child. Rousseau warned against attempts to force the development of children's speech, believing that defects in pronunciation could occur. Vocabulary must coincide with accumulated representation. Number 2, from 2 years to 12 years, the creation of conditions for the child to acquire the widest possible range of ideas, to assist in the correct perception of surrounding objects and phenomena. Rousseau offered exercise for development of hearing, vision, and touch. He recommended teaching without books. The child must in practice master the elements of various natural and exercise. It is harmful to learn moral idea until they become a child's needs. From 12 to 15 years, children are prepared for systematic mental education. In the selection of educational subjects, Rousseau insists on learning useful knowledge, natural history, math, and so on. From age 15 to 25, the formation of the moral character of a person ends. During this year, he gets acquainted with the norms and regulation of the world around him. Education assumes particular importance, the development of good feelings will, and means of moral education is the reading of historical books. The description of natural education in each of these periods is devoted to special parts, books of the novel Emile or on education. Of course, the idea of Rousseau was unreal for some way, because first of all it was 17th, 18th century, and the second, it's really hard to make this nature education, and his idea was really unreal, but now we like see his idea like first a really humanistic idea, and his idea was the first when we can see education for everyone, so not depends on how rich or how poor. And it's really great because in 18th century, famous philosopher, pedagogist, psychologist start to think about education for everyone. And for now, of course, it's most important in the democratic way. So next famous pedagogist is Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. So Pestalozzi was Swiss educator, one of the largest humanist educators of the late 18th, early 19th century, who made a significant contribution to the development of pedagogical theory and practice. So we saw Czech pedagogist, English pedagogist, French pedagogist, and now a Swiss pedagogist, different European famous pedagogists. So Pestalozzi, he considered the main goal of upbringing and education to be the self-development of man's natural abilities, his constant improvement, and the formation of a moral character. The large place in the training and education of Pestalozzi assigned to work, the combination of teaching and work suggesting gradually complicating them in accordance with the individual and age characteristic of a child. Idea of Pestalozzi was because he was the first. He thought that work upbringing it's really important for human development, and he was really kind person and tried to help poor child, try to help them and to educate them, and also not only educate, also work and understand how to live and how to get some money for their work. It's Pestalozzi. So his idea was really new and modern for 18th century. So it was the famous pedagogist which got a big influence to 20th century, 21st century. About some idea of 20th and 21st century, of course, we spoke previous lecture, and now I want to show you some small video about some more modern idea, and we can see how everything changed, and now it will be some idea about American modern school, about some principles, and we'll see this small video. I hope it will be okay. Let's see. Yes, I think it will be work. So here is example of some modern pedagogical idea which connected with the idea of Pestalozzi, Rousseau, Locke, and of course Comenius.
Montessori education is based on the principles developed by Maria Montessori, who opened her first school for children of low-income workers in an apartment building in Rome in 1907. The school was called Casa dei Bambini, Home for Children. This first casa was furnished with a teacher's table, a stove, a blackboard, some chairs, group tables for the children, and a cabinet filled with materials that Montessori developed in her earlier career when she researched how to teach kids who experience some form of mental disability. Maria Montessori created the materials after she realized that students seemed to understand complex concepts better when they engaged all their senses. Activities at this first school included personal care, such as dressing and undressing, care of the environment, like sweeping, dusting, and gardening. Otherwise, they were free to move around and play with the materials. Montessori did not teach herself, but instead oversaw the classroom work of her teachers. Montessori observed that children showed episodes of deep concentration and multiple repetitions of the same activity. Given free choice, kids showed more interest in practical activities and the materials than normal toys, sweets, or other rewards. Over time, spontaneous self-discipline emerged. Montessori concluded that working independently, children seemed to reach new levels of autonomy and became self-motivated learners. She began to see the role of the teacher as a facilitator of young human beings who are free to move and act within the limits of a prepared environment. The goal? To grow children to become independent and responsible adults who share a love for learning. Soon after, Montessori herself and her ideas started traveling the world to inspire progressive thinkers and educators from all over. The inventors, Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison, became early advocates. Later alumni include Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia, author Gabriel Garcia Marquez, as well as the two Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin. Today, the term Montessori stands more for a method than a school itself. The fact that it can be used freely by anyone led to a great variation of schools. Educators all over the world borrow Montessori's name, insights, and materials to organize kindergartens, elementary schools, special needs programs, or even full 12-year curriculums. Some parents use it for homeschooling. The following characteristics are shared among most programs. Students are free to choose what to learn. Open classrooms that allow free movement. Use of specialized Montessori materials. Mixed age classes from 0 to 3, 3 to 6, or 6 to 12, so children can learn from each other. Uninterrupted blocks of study time, usually 3 hours. No grading or homework, and a trained teacher. Maria Montessori once famously said, "Never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed." What are your thoughts on Montessori? Please share your opinions in the comments below.
So, it was an example of more modern idea, and for now Montessori idea is really popular in 21st century, and we know a lot of kindergarten of Montessori idea and primary school of Montessori idea. And also later I show you another type of modern pedagogical idea. So the Citizenship reflects theory of learning and the theory of gradual formation of the mental action. Summing up the brief excursion of idea of pedagogy, we can conclude that moral and mental development has been valued at all time. A special role in the formation of personality is played by a need for labor training, which contribute to the awarenesses of the will in overcoming difficulties, and the ability to earn a living makes it possible to assert oneself and be independent. There was a clear awareness of the depends of the learning content of a young person on the social environment. There was a pedagogy of higher education and understanding of the obligation of continuous replenishment of knowledge, and at the same time the need to form the ability to competently manage their intellectual capabilities, overcoming mental feature, neural overload, and so on. And pedagogy most commonly understood as approach to teaching in the theory and practice of learning, and how this process influenced by the social, political, psychological developments of learners. Pedagogy, taken as an academic discipline, is the study of how knowledge and skills are imparted in the educational context, and considers the interaction that takes during learning. Both the theory and practice of pedagogy vary greatly as they reflect different social, political, and cultural contexts. And pedagogy is often described as the act of learning, teaching. Pedagogy idea of pedagogy in Europe and idea of pedagogy in Russia, of course, not the same. And after the second small video, we will speak about pedagogy in Russia, and then we come back to these two slides. But first of all, I want to show you idea of another famous pedagogies, and you will see how different idea in 20th century if we can compare them with the idea of 17th or 18th century. And then we come back to these previous slides.
There are only a few ideas that had as much of an impact on education as those of John Dewey. To understand his ideas, let's imagine Dewey reappears in the modern world with the mission to implement his theories in a conservative school. Dewey championed learning by doing, also known as experiential learning. He observed that children learn better when they are actively engaged because they are immersed in the present and not a distant future, such as final exams. In biology, students don't read books, but instead grow plants, harvest fruits, and then feed them to snails to see what happens. Sometimes things work out, sometimes accidents happen. Whatever the outcome, the students take notes of their observations and form rich, memorable experiences. At the end of each class, they summarize their learning and turn to discussions. The discussions prepare the students for life in a democratic society, where decisions ought to be based on reasonable arguments. Through the debates, the children learn to formulate their own ideas, convince others, and learn to see the world from a different point of view. In one discussion, some started to argue that school uniforms limit self-expression and that they should be abolished. Dewey, who believed that schools should prepare children for life itself and serve society as a force for innovation and reform, encouraged those students to start a petition to find out for themselves if real social change is possible. Classes are interactive because Dewey believes that interaction with the environment is essential for the learning process, since education is an experience that is subject to constant change. Passive recipients of knowledge, on the other hand, learn very little, if anything at all. The group who started the petition present their ideas to the teacher and start a dialogue that expands their understanding and underlines their learning. Learning is interdisciplinary. Dewey believed that continuity is critical to comprehension, and that an interdisciplinary education allows students to build on what they already know, which strengthens their understanding. What they observed in biology is being calculated in math, written about in English, and put into images through the arts. This provides the students the opportunity to learn how things are connected. To the brain, this process is more effective because it can link new knowledge with previous experiences and build stronger mental models. Dewey believed that when societies calculate the price of education, they shouldn't only look at the cost of school buildings, teachers' salaries, and other resources. They should also consider the costs of all the hours input by the children, because the children are the future of our society and human progress. Their time in class ought not to be wasted. It is thus the school's responsibility to be a playground to practice a future we wish to see, so when the kids grow up, they can go and create it. About education, Dewey famously said, "It's not a preparation for life. Education is life itself." The group that sought dress code reform gained a deeper knowledge about the topic and were able to develop good arguments. They printed their demands on banners and tracts and discussed their ideas with everyone until the day the majority of students and teachers had signed their petition. Eventually, the petition was presented to the principal and a new school rule was passed. Dewey's ideas were not always popular during his time, and while we made some progress in education over the last 100 years, is the situation really any better today? What do you think? Did you experience learning by doing in your school? And does your school encourage you and your friends to engage in social reform and create the future we wish to see? Please share your thoughts in the comments below.
So it was the second modern idea which created in 20th century, but really used it in 21st century. So we can see old pedagogical idea and modern pedagogical idea, and we see how it's changed, and it's really great in pedagogy. So let's come back to these slides. The pedagogy adopted by teachers shape their action, judgments, and other teaching strategies by taking into consideration theory of learning, understanding of students and their needs, the backgrounds and interests of individual students. Its aim may range from a fairly liberal education to the narrow specific of vocational education. Conventional Western pedagogy views the teacher as knowledge holder and students as the recipient of knowledge. And here we can see described by Paulo Freire as breaking methods, but the theory of pedagogy increasingly identifies the student as an agent and the teacher as a facilitator. The concept of education is timeless, as it retains its relevance in each area of our history, and pedagogical education, as its branch is designed to train future teachers while based on leading scientific and social paradigms. So it was development of pedagogical idea in Europe. And now we speak about development of pedagogical idea in Russia. And of course we start from ancient time in Russia, and one of the earliest monuments of pedagogical literature was the instruction created in the 20th century, and the author was Grand Duke Vladimir Monomach. And it was first idea about how teach children, about what the importance of understanding and importance of educating children to be appreciated and be more polite to parents and so on. So Vladimir Monomach, so we can see that it's 11th, 20th century. He maintained the idea of God's constant presence in human affair, but the opposite of European medieval teaching, glorifying asceticism. The Kiev prince noted that the human loving God does not all require from every person such extra efforts as retreats, fasting, and etc. He called on his children, do not forget the poor and the rich, to read mantra, deeply love the homeland, do not spare life while protecting it from enemies. In addition, he drew attention to the needs to precisely master knowledge, respect, and love the book. Monomach considered important means of education and positive example, and it was really modern and really great for this century. Many consider the idea of medieval education in Russia to be a collection instruction from the 18th century known as domostroy. It means that parents are accountable to God for their children, but children should honor their parents. Domostroy recommended harsh method of upbringing, while right was combined with the requirements to love and take care of children. Domostroy was created when rule Ivan IV, very famous Russian Tsar. And here we can see some picture connected with domostroy. But of course, by decree of Peter I, the Kiev Mongol College was received the status of an academy in 1701, became the first institution of higher education in the Eastern Slavic lands. And of course, we know that Peter the Great, Peter I, was a very important emperor in Russia, and his idea was really modern and really great. So here we can see Slavic Greek Latin Academy, which founded in Moscow, one of the oldest and one of the important in history of pedagogy in Russia. So, in the School of Mathematics and Navigation, which considered the first in Europe state royal school, were representative of all classes studied. Later opened engineering, artillery, surgeon, mining school, academic university, and gymnasium. So, the most important differences, the most important modern idea of pedagogy started created from Peter the Great. An important it was some pedagogical facts that Peter first shared the academical with the responsibility of conducting classes in order to prepare the scientific and pedagogical shift. Great attention was paid to the training of Russian scientist Mikhail Lomonosov, trying to make the academy a center of education. And of course, Lomonosov is really important, really famous Russian scientist, and Moscow State University is called his name. So here is Russian scientist Mikhail Vasilievich Lomonosov and his experiments. He is one of the first who start to create some really interesting chemical and physical experiment, and also he wrote a lot of book about how to study, how to teach. Among his discoveries were the atmosphere of Venus and the law of conservation of mass in chemical reaction. His spheres of science were natural science, chemistry, physics, mineralogy, history, art, philosophy, optical devices, and other. Lomonosov was also a poet and influenced the formation of the modern Russian literature language. In 1760, Lomonosov published a history of Russia. So here we can see a mark about Lomonosov and Moscow State University, of course. So laid an extremely important role in the history of the development of pedagogical thought in Russia was Ushinsky, Konstantin Dmitrievich Ushinsky. Ushinsky was really famous scientist, like many in Europe. He is rightfully considered the founder of the original Russian pedagogical science and the creator of the public school in Russia. He solved all general pedagogical and didactic issues from the point of view of serving the interest of his motherland, his people, guided by the motto, "Do as much as possible good for your fatherland." And here is Konstantin Dmitrievich Ushinsky, famous Russian teacher. So we can see that it's 19th century. His idea was really famous in all Russia. And for example, here in Ulyanovsk we've got Museum of Education in 19th century. And also we can see some book, an idea of Konstantin Dmitrievich Ushinsky too. Ushinsky was the first time scientifically substantiated. First of all, teaching training system as an important part of pedagogical science. Considering a person as a subject of education, he pointed out the need of through study of pedagogy, child psychology, the phenomena of social life in which a student exists, to be examined with knowledge of the history of the state and the characteristics of these people. Ushinsky said education itself, if it wishes happiness to a person, should educate him not for happiness, but to prepare him for the labor of life. He considered equally necessary physical and mental labor, where teaching is an important form of mental labor. Here you can see a very famous book of Konstantin Dmitrievich Ushinsky. It's called Native Word, or родное слово in Russian, and a typical school in the end of 19th century, which connected with the idea of Ushinsky. We can see some pictures, some visual effects to explain how to teach and about what we need to teach. And also we can see that in class boys and girls study together too. Ushinsky thought that it's really important for a child to know his own language and understand his own history. So, next important period in Russian education, it was Soviet period, so USSR. The Soviet period in the development of pedagogical thought in Russia also put forward a number of distinctive features. In the first decade of Soviet rule, many new problems were solved in the connection with other relations in economic and economic construction. It was important to develop a specific system of political education and the introduction of young people to productive work. It is necessary to develop skills of social life among students on the basis of labor and organize a children's team. And the issue of resolved in the works like Blonsky, Krupskaya, Shatsky, and Makarenko. It is the post-war period made a significant contribution to the development of domestic pedagogy. Sukhamlinsky developing practical area of moral and labor education. So the most famous names, of course, it's Makarenko and Sukhamlinsky. Makarenko is a really important scientist in the beginning of 20th century, and Sukhamlinsky in the second part of 20th century. And let's speak about Makarenko. Makarenko was a Russian and Soviet educator, social worker, and writer, the most influential educational theorist in the Soviet Union, who promoted democratic idea and principle in educational theory and practice. As one of the founders of Soviet pedagogy, he elaborated the theory and methodology of upbringing in self-governing child collective and introduced the concept of productive labor into the educational system. Makarenko is often reckoned among the world's great educator, and his books have been published in many countries. So here we can see Makarenko. Pedagogical poem, it's a famous book of Makarenko, and the photography Makarenko with his students. Speak about Makarenko. Idea of Makarenko, it's really interesting idea because he tried to make some really hard pedagogical idea connected with students with very bad character, with very hard time in history, and he produced new methods. This method was sometimes a bit hard, but it really worked. So, and the second one is Vasily Alexandrovich Sukhamlinsky. So, it's the second part of 20th century. He was a humanistic educator of the Soviet Union who saw the aim of education in producing a truly human being. He considers the children's team as a basis of education, revealed the laws of its formation and leadership activities. New approaches in training and education were the works of a whole galaxy of teachers who create the pedagogy of cooperation. And the idea of Sukhamlinsky is like humanistic idea. And in 21st century, his idea is still very important, very interesting, and very famous. And he create his main pedagogical idea, and this idea was the idea of citizenship and humanity in pedagogy, education for the sake of happiness of the child in the main meaning of his labors, to discover the creation in every person in the task of school education, the unity of learning and the ideological life of people in holistic pedagogical processes. So his idea was really humanistic and really kind to everyone. Three main findings. Children learn intensively and with pleasure when their individual abilities are taken into account, and atmosphere of success and great for everyone in cooperation, parents, children, and teacher. So three parts. But however, with the collapse of USSR, interesting representative of the pedagogy of cooperation in different countries, and of course his idea right now it's a bit changed because right now we've got Russian Federation and got another ideological idea, but his kind of pedagogy is still very popular. Briefly summarize the historical analysis of pedagogical thought in Russia, we can say that since ancient time, the attention of the elders has been focused on the formation in young people of hard work and desire to learn businesses, not to result change but know the craft. All people without exception do not just have to love their homeland but not sparing their lives, must be able to protect it from enemy. The example of the elders in the revert in all sector of the population. This is how elder and young people became and remain moral and hardworking all their lives. Parents not only take care of the children, but are accountable to the Supreme Judge God for the behavior of the children, for their ability to be responsible to the state and the church in their action to work tirelessly. Since the time of Peter the Great, Peter the First, there remains a wide choice in teaching science crafts. Higher National School has always been famous for the participation of leading scientists in the learning processes, which along with training include young people in research activities. Since the middle of the 19th century, the state took teacher training seriously, demanding a broad-minded teacher, thereby improving the education of young. And of course, right now in 21st century, in Europe, in Russia Federation, we've got a democratic idea. The main idea is connected with democracy in the world. It's education for everyone, it's free education, it's humanistic education, it's education without punishment and so on. And right now, pedagogy, it's really important science. And pedagogy developed together with psychology, with philosophy, and it's important to understand that right now in the world we've got a lot of different type of school, different modern idea, different more small idea in each country, and it's really important to read pedagogical book, understanding that the upbringing of young people important not only in school but in family too. And in the end, I show you this last small video about some pedagogical, psychological idea of Vygotsky and how this idea connected with pedagogy.
Vygotsky's theory of social development argues that community and language play a central part in learning. While Jean Piaget concluded that children's cognitive development happens in stages, Vygotsky rejected his ideas and believed that children develop independently of specific stages as the result of social interactions. Vygotsky claimed that we are born with 4 elementary mental functions: attention, sensation, perception, and memory. It is our social and cultural environment that allows us to use these elementary skills to develop and finally gain higher mental functions. This development ideally happens in the zone of proximal development. First, there is what we can do on our own. Then, or what Vygotsky called the more knowledgeable other. Last, there is what's beyond our reach. To illustrate this, let us think of twins who were raised in a community in which boys are expected to learn and succeed, while girls are only expected to be pretty. At the age of 10 months, both have the ability to crawl and are in the zone of proximal development for learning how to stand on their feet. The more knowledgeable other, in this case the father, provides the boy with opportunities to practice in a playroom that he is equipped with scaffolding and other objects. The boy is encouraged to explore the equipment, and eventually he uses it. He's standing on his feet. The girl also has the potential to stand, but does not receive any support in learning the skill. When we compare the two, we see that while the girl is still trying to get up, the boy has moved into a new zone. He knows how to balance while standing, and now has the potential to learn how to walk. Both will eventually learn how to walk, but according to Vygotsky, the boy will be more skilled. The same principles apply to all learning and the development of higher cognitive functions, and only those learning with the assistance of a capable mentor can reach the full potential of their ability. Vygotsky, therefore, believed that inside the zone of proximal development, learning can precede development, which means that a child is able to learn skills that go beyond their natural maturity. He also established an explicit connection between speech and mental concepts, arguing that inner speech develops from external speech via a gradual process of internalization. This means that thought itself develops as a result of conversation. Therefore, younger children who don't finish this process can only think out loud. Once the process is complete, inner speech and spoken language become independent. Lev Vygotsky died of tuberculosis in 1934, at the age of 37. Despite his young age, he became one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. He left the following advice for educating their own. What do you think? Can a child learn anything regardless of any developmental prerequisites? And do we learn only through social and cultural contexts? And if so, do you think it is appropriate for a more knowledgeable other to determine what a child should learn next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
So, it was last video about some idea connected with the really famous Vygotsky. So, as we see, pedagogy, it's really interesting and big science, and of course we together see just a small part of this. We speak about education, about history of pedagogy, about upbringing, about some different type of school and so on. And also we see that pedagogy and psychology are different science, and psychology is really big and hard science, and pedagogy is really big and hard science, but they're very close together and help together. Pedagogy and psychology, it's like two friends which help each other. And for this part we finished with this part of pedagogy, and we finished with all our course about psychology and pedagogy. So in general it was 8 lectures, which 5 of them was about psychology and 3 of them about pedagogy. And I hope that you maybe find some new information for you, and if it's interesting for you to know more about pedagogy or psychology, in internet we've got a lot of different books, a lot of different films about psychology and pedagogy, and it's not important what will be your future profession. Pedagogy and psychology, it's really useful for everyone, and it's really important to know for everyone. That's why all students in our university study psychology and pedagogy. Not depends humanitarian. How many persons here? So today it was small lecture, it was last small lecture. Okay. And this lecture I also downloaded to portal Rousseau, and today I sent it to your mentor, and you can read it one more time. So, from 27th of December, it will be our credit test in portal also. I already wrote about it to your mentor. Don't forget, please, this test is important for everyone. It's like our final test. It was considered a question about psychology and pedagogy, and this test will be in portal also. So please don't forget about it. And also, as I said, not only this test means your credit, also you work in this all 5 months, and all these tasks. And generally, we've got 7 seminars, 7 different seminars. Sometimes tests, sometimes answer the question, essay, and so on. And if you for all this 4-5 months didn't do anything and it's like 0 points in January, of course it doesn't mean that you get credit. It means that you will pass the credit in January. That's why for some open question you still have chance to write it. I will check it later after Sunday. But for some test is closed, because for test it's small time, and I always wrote about it and speak about it, that we've got there's 2 days for the test. And also for final test, for credit test, it will be just 3 days for it, and then it will be closed. It's credit test, and if you didn't notice it or thought that you've got 1-2 weeks, no, you've got 3 days and 1 chance to pass it. The test is not hard. Test is connected with lecture about psychology and pedagogy. And if you read this lecture, if you make some seminar, it will be easy for you to pass it. And of course, you've got your credits, and everything will be okay. So about credit, I think I wrote everything in general chat to your mentor. So please don't forget, that's from Monday at 9 o'clock. And till Monday you've got some time to pass your some task in pedagogy and psychology course, for example, answer the question, essay, or pedagogical situation, something like that. So you still have time for it, so please use your time. If you got some question, you can write me in portal Rousseau or by mail. Your mentor can write me in WhatsApp, but only mentor. WhatsApp is only for mentor, please notice it. For other students, portal, mail, please welcome. But of course not at Sunday, because Sunday is free day, it's holiday. So now we will finish with our lecture for today. I see that today is not so many people, but okay, it's our last lecture, 24th of December. We've got another credit, another exam, a lot of work, so it was our last lecture. And as I said, the presentation, I send it to your mentor, and your mentor send it to you, of course. At Monday, I hope everyone start pass the final test, and we don't have some problem with our credit, and everything will be okay. So it was a pleasure to give you some information. If you got some question, you already know how to contact me. So thank you for watching, for listening, for contacting me, for your answer, for your test answer, and so on. And see you in portal soon, when I start to see your points, your test answer, and so on. So let's finish with our part for today. So good luck for credit and exam in December and January, and goodbye. Thank you.